Kingpins are often slated as orchestrators of violence and responsible for ruining the lives of many. Even so, they are still held in high regard due to their intriguing personalities and the urban myths attached to their legend. When you talk big hitters, these are the dons. This is the top 10 most notorious kingpins of all time. But before we get to it, quickly subscribe and like this video, and don't forget to turn on post notifications. At number 10, we have Michael Franzese. Born to Colombo family underboss John aka Sonny Franzese and wife Christina Coppobianco in 1951. Although Michael was raised in the shadowy world of the New York Mafia, he set his sights on a more straight-edge route, instead choosing to start medical school at Hofstra University. His dream of leading a more conventional life was short-lived when his father ended up in prison shortly after. So now with his family struggling for money, Michael dropped out of college and joined the Colombo family in 1975. He quickly rose up the ladder, serving as a co-regime and directed a crew of over 300 soldiers. At the height of his mafia career, he was generating $5 to $8 million per week, primarily through tax scams and gasoline bootlegging schemes. Money was rolling in, but after he married his wife Camille Garcia, he found faith and chose to turn his back on the life. After paying almost $50 million to the US government, he was handed a 10-year sentence in 1985. The mafia were displeased and issued a price on his head as he violated his oath, to which his father surprisingly agreed to. Fast forward to today, and Michael is a free man, deeply connected to his faith and serves as a motivational speaker. The fact that in 1986, Fortune magazine ranked Franzese as number 18 on its list of the 50 most wealthy and powerful mob bosses, but is the only one from that list currently not in jail or dead, alone is enough to make him a legend. Ocio Cardenas Gulen, also known as El Mata Amigos, which translates to the Friend Killer, was born in 1967 in Mexico. He came from humble beginnings, working as a mechanic, before being recruited into the Gulf cartel by Juan Garcia Abrego. After Abrego's arrest in 1996, he had his friend Salvador Gomez killed, who was next in line to assume control of the cartel. Guess it's safe to say the alias Friend Killer perfectly fits, as he proceeded to have his close associates killed in order to establish authority. He infiltrated the former incorruptible Mexican Special Forces branch of the military and amassed a private mercenary army which enforced his will. The army became known as Los Zetas, infamous for their lack of empathy, being more likely to behead an official than bribe them. Feeling untouchable, Cardenas took it too far when he threatened a pair of DEA agents. The US government weren't going to let that slide, and worked with the Mexican police to have him captured in 2003, then extradited to US in 2007. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison in 2010. Looks like we won't be seeing him anytime soon. Amanda Carrillo Fuentes. He was born in Mexico in 1956. Nephew of Guadalajara cartel boss Ernesto Carrillo, he initially served in the DFS, the Mexican Secret Police Force and Intelligence Agency. He was later employed by the cartel as a pilot, before becoming one of its top lieutenants. He utilized his piloting background to smuggle South American cocaine into Mexico by air, and then flying the drugs into the United States and Canada. Due to his methods, he was suitably dubbed Lord of the Skies. He is said to be one of the highest grossing kingpins of all time, amassing a whopping $25 billion over the span of his career. Unfortunately, he couldn't enjoy his riches, as a botched plastic surgery operation resulted in his untimely death in 1997. Gilberto Rodriguez Orejilla, born in 1939, headed the Cali cartel from its inception in the 70s as arguably the most senior of its four godfathers. He was said to be a lavish, nonchalant individual who owned several opulent mansions and had 3 wives, enjoying their company on different days of the week. Utilizing his political and business connections, the Cali cartel were able to build an empire which at its height controlled 80% of the American cocaine trade and 90% of the European market, making an alleged $65 million a day. In the mid-1990s, after collaborating with the Search Bloc to eliminate Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel, the Search Bloc turned against them, capturing Rodriguez in 1994. He was subsequently extradited to the United States in 2004, where he is currently serving a 30-year sentence for his troubles. Al Capone, born to Italian immigrants in New York in 1899. He was expelled from school aged 14 for punching a teacher in the face. After he left school, he became involved with a number of local street gangs. Capone later moved to Chicago to work for the crime boss John Torrio, where he climbed the ranks to become his right-hand man. They made their money primarily through engaging in illicit liquor transactions. Capone was slashed across his face with a knife by Frank Galluccio after he unintentionally insulted his wife, leaving Capone with notable scars on the left side of his face, resulting in his alias, Scarface. To prevent embarrassment, he claimed the scar was caused by a German soldier in a melee during World War I. Torrio was killed by a rival gang, and Al Capone took over as the crime boss, turning the organization into a money-making machine. He would use part of the money to help the poor, and even built the first soup kitchen for the homeless in Chicago. On February the 14th, 1929, the Valentine's Day Massacre happened when Capone ordered a hit on a rival gang led by Bugs Moran. Several of his men went to a garage owned by Moran's gang, disguised as police officers. They gunned down and killed 7 of Moran's men. The government decided they need to put Capone in jail. Capone spent a short time in jail for previous crimes, but the government couldn't gather enough evidence to put him away. A prohibition agent named Elliot Ness decided to go after Capone's operations. He gathered a number of loyal and honest agents that later earned the nickname the Untouchables because they couldn't be bribed by Capone. Ness and his men managed to raid a number of Capone's illegal facilities. Capone tried to have Ness assassinated multiple times but failed. In the end, Ness didn't catch Capone for his organized crime activities, but helped the IRS catch him for evading taxes. Capone was sent to prison in 1932 for tax evasion. He served 8 years in prison, including time at the famous island prison of Alcatraz. By the time he was released in 1939, he was sick, and later died in 1947 from a heart attack. John Gotti, aka the Teflon Don, was born in 1940 in New York. As a teenager, he became a leader of a local gang. He later joined the Gambino family, one of New York's largest organized crime syndicates. In 1973, he was sentenced to only 4 years in prison for the murder of Gambino leader Carlo Gambino. During his sentence, he bribed officials and was released prematurely. In 1985, Paul Castellano, the successor to Carlo Gambino, was killed, and John emerged as the leader of the Gambino family in 1986. Following several unsuccessful prosecutions, one of which failed because the jury foreman was paid a $60,000 bribe, Gotti became known as the Teflon Don. This was simply down to the fact that any criminal charges levied against him never stuck. By 1990, however, the FBI had collected damaging evidence against Gotti through an extensive eavesdropping operation. In 1992, after a lengthy and widely publicized trial in which Sammy Gravano, in violation of a fundamental rule of the mafia behavior, testified against him, Gotti was convicted on 13 criminal counts, including the murder of Castellano and others, racketeering, and the obstruction of justice, and was therefore sentenced to life in prison. In 1998, he was diagnosed with throat cancer and subsequently died in 2002. Frank Lucas was born in North Carolina in 1930. The murder of his 12-year-old cousin by the Ku Klux Klan led him to embark on a life of crime. He initially partook in petty crime and later moved to New York as recommended by his mother. Whilst in New York, he was recruited by heroin kingpin Bumpy Johnson, initially working as his driver, then climbing through the ranks to eventually become his right-hand man. After Johnson's death in 1968, due to heart failure, Lucas took control. His heroin operation smuggled 98 to 100% pure heroin from Southeast Asia into the United States in the coffins of dead US Army soldiers who were killed during the Vietnam War. During his prime, it is said that his empire was making $1 million each day. Lucas lived lavishly, often donning a $100,000 floor-length chinchilla coat and a matching $25,000 hat, an attention-grabbing ensemble that Lucas wore to the Ali Fraser boxing match in 1971. The Drug Enforcement Agency and the New York Police Department ultimately ended Lucas's reign in 1975, with Lucas receiving a 70-year prison sentence. However, Lucas later decided to turn state witness and provided evidence that resulted in dozens of drug-related arrests. He was released from prison in 1981 after his sentence was reduced. 3 years later, Lucas was again busted for a drug deal that violated his parole, and he spent 7 years behind bars. He died in 2019 at the age of 88 from natural causes. Griselda Blanco was born in Colombia in 1943. In her earlier years, she was a pickpocketer and a prostitute. At the age of 20, she married her second husband, Alberto Bravo, who introduced her to the cocaine industry. They moved together to New York in the mid-1970s to set up operations there and soon took over a large majority of the market. She was busted by authorities after they intercepted a shipment of 150 kilos of cocaine. Before she could be arrested, she fled back to Colombia. She returned to America a few years later, this time setting up in Miami. Her network spread across the United States and became known as the godmother of cocaine, as she raked in $80 million a month. She was allegedly behind 250 murders on Colombian soil and responsible for 40 deaths in America. She was so ruthless, it is alleged that she even killed the father to her own son Michael. The fast life caught up with her when she was arrested by DEA agents in 1985 and served over a decade in federal prison on drugs charges. After which, she went to Miami to face murder charges, but due to scandal amongst the prosecution and the witness, she was able to reach a deal which meant that she only had to serve a 10-year sentence. She was released in 2004 and deported back to Colombia, where she tried to escape her past but was ironically gunned down by 2 men on motorcycles in 2012, the same method she became infamous for to eliminate her rivals. Joaquin Guzman, commonly referred to as El Chapo, was born in Mexico. Though his date of birth is often disputed, it's widely accepted that he was born in 1957. By his teens, he had been kicked out of his family home and entered the drugs trade, growing marijuana for small amounts of cash. By his late 20s, he was supervising logistics for Kingpin Felix Gallardo, who was arrested in 1985 for killing a DEA agent. Guzman inherited some of his former boss's territory and founded his own cartel known as Sinaloa. After Medellin and Cali began to wane, Sinaloa took control of the cocaine trade extending from South America to the United States. In addition to cocaine, Sinaloa trafficked heroin, marijuana, and methamphetamine into the US and beyond. Eventually, the cartel's tentacles touched 5 continents and grew to be the biggest drugs operation in the world. During his prime, his net worth was rumored to be north of $3 billion. It is widely reported that he is responsible for 2,000 to 3,000 deaths. In 1993, he was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He still managed to maintain power. Through bribes, he arranged conjugal visits and was allowed to run his drug operation. Such was his influence. In 2001, the prison guards helped him escape in a laundry cart. He continued expanding his operations and eventually became the #1 drug target of the US government. In 2014, Guzman was finally apprehended by Mexican authorities. Declining requests by American officials to have Guzman extradited to the United States, Mexican President Enrique Peña vowed that Guzman wouldn't escape again. Yet less than 18 months later, Guzman orchestrated a second daring flight from prison in July 2015. For this escape, Guzman slipped through an opening in his cell shower section, made his way down a 30-foot ladder, and then travelled through a tunnel network that connected his cell to a house that was still under construction about a mile away. On January 8, 2016, Mexican President Peña Nieto announced on Twitter that Mexican authorities had recaptured Guzman after a shootout. In January 2017, the Mexican government extradited Guzman to the United States to face drug trafficking and other charges. The following day, Guzman appeared in court and pleaded not guilty to over a dozen charges. In 2019, El Chapo was sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years, along with ordering him to pay $12.6 billion in restitution. At number 1, we have the king, the pioneer, Pablo Escobar, also known as El Patron or Don Pablo. He was born in 1949 in Colombia and got an early start in criminality when he started stealing cars and selling phony diplomas. Escobar ventured into the cocaine business after allegedly killing Fabio Restrepo in 1975 and seizing power. He expanded operations exponentially, and his organization later became known as the Medellin Cartel. By the 1980s, he had an estimated net worth of $30 billion, making $60 million a day at the height of his reign. He was responsible for 80% of the cocaine smuggled into the United States. He engaged in philanthropic exploits and was seen as the Robin Hood-like figure for the poor. Capitalizing off his popularity, he set his heights on becoming president of Colombia. He managed to get elected as an alternate member of Colombia's Congress in 1982. However, parts of his shady background was unveiled by Rodrigo Lara, and he was forced to resign. Lara was eventually killed, of course. With his political aspirations shattered, he became even more ruthless. One such example of this was when he ordered the bombing of a jetliner in 1989, hoping presidential candidate Cesar Gaviria was on board. Turned out he wasn't, and over 100 people died as a result of the explosion. In 1992, a manhunt was issued by the search bloc who worked with the DEA to capture Escobar. The authorities caught up to him, and in December 1993, a firefight ensued and he was subsequently killed. Well guys, that's it. That's the 10 most notorious kingpins of all time. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, share and subscribe. We out.